Right before we jump into this video, if you want to take better pictures in only 11 days, I created a free mini video course called 11 Days to Better Photography that you can sign up for right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/11 days. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a comparison between the Nikon D500 and the D7500. I want to help you decide which one is right for you. Should you upgrade from a D7200 to a D7500, or should you just start with the D500? Let's start with the specs. Let's start with the image sensor. You have a 20.9 megapixel DX format CMOS sensor in both of these cameras. That means it's the exact same sensor, so you probably will get very similar results. Moving on, image processor. Xpeed 5 in the Nikon D500 and an Xpeed 5 in a D7500. So they have basically the same guts. That means that the processor is exactly the same and the image sensor is the same, which means you should get fairly similar results with your images. Now, what is the ISO? Well, being again that it's the same sensor and the same processor, you get 100 ISO all the way up to 51,200 natively, expandable to high 5, which is 1.64 million. Exactly the same. Let's get to something that is different. The Nikon D500 shoots at 10 frames a second, where the D7500 shoots at only 8. Now I say 8 as in only, but that's not that bad. That is just as good as my Nikon Nikon F5 did back when I bought this in like 1999 or something, or 98. Yeah. 8 frames a second was the pro line. Now that you can do 8 frames a second, that is pretty insane, but the check mark goes to the D500 because it shoots a couple more frames a second than the D7500. Moving on to the autofocus system, the Nikon D500 has a 153-point AF system with 99 cross-type sensors. That is an unbelievable focusing system. And on the D7500, you have 51-point AF system with only 15 being cross-type. Now, this is one of the major differences between these two cameras, and the check mark definitely goes to the Nikon D500 on this one. Autofocus is a major consideration when you're trying to buy a body. It all depends on what you're shooting. If you're doing a lot of portraits and nature, then it's not really as important as if you're shooting action, sports, or whatever else is out there where you need to have autofocus tracking more points. So D500 gets the win there. Max shutter speed, they both do 1/8,000th of a second, so nothing different there. How many frames in a row can you take? Well, with the D500, you can shoot 200 RAW files in a burst, in a row. That's a lot of files. The D7500 can do 50. Now, it's not as many, but that's still a lot of files to push through in a matter of, well, it's 8 frames a second, so it's at least 5 whole seconds, let's say 6 seconds, that you hold the button down. You probably never will need to do that. You won't outrun that buffer, at least in the RAWs. So video. Same video, 4K UHD recording at 30 frames a second. So the autofocus in both of these cameras for video isn't very good, so the check mark on this one goes to Canon. Both of these cameras have Wi-Fi and NFC. Not a huge deal, but it is good to use an app when you want to throw the camera up on a tripod or on a monopod or something and see the results on your phone as you're seeing it live. That is helpful. Now, what do we have in the way of headphone and microphone jacks? Both of these cameras have headphone and a microphone jack, which comes in handy if you're doing external audio. So check mark, ba-bing, goes to both of them right there. In terms of viewfinder coverage, they both have 100% viewfinder. Are you seeing a pattern here? These cameras are extremely similar. Moving on to the touchscreens. They both have 3.2-inch touchscreens that are tilting. Now, they're not vari-angle like the Nikon D5600 or like some of the Canons have where they rotate all the way around, but they do tilt, and that is a nice feature to have if you're shooting video low and you want to tilt the screen this way, or if you're shooting up high and you want to tilt the screen this way. I love the touchscreens, but there is a difference between the D500 and the D7500 in terms of quality of the screen. So the resolution of the D500 is 2.53 million dots, and on the D7500, it's 922,000 dots. So you have a better screen on the Nikon D500, which means the check mark goes to the D500. Now let's talk about the memory card options you have in these cameras. The D500 takes an XQD and an SD card. That is a nice option to have, especially because it has 2 card slots. The D7500 just has 1 SD card slot. Now for those who know about the D7200, the older camera, that one had 2 card slots. So in this case, they got rid of an extra card slot, which makes no sense. I'm a big proponent of if I have 2 slots, I'm going to do redundant shooting to both. So definitely a check mark to the D500 in this one. Now let's talk about the batteries that the cameras take. They both take the ENEL15 and also the ENEL15A, which is a new version of the battery. So right there, they do the exact same thing, but I need to bring this up right now because a lot of people were upset that the Nikon D7500 will not have an option for a grip, whereas the Nikon D500 does have a grip. That means you can have 2 batteries in the camera. That means you can shoot longer when you're doing video as well as when you're shooting stills, and that's just something that the D7500 doesn't have, so check mark to the D500. So now let's look at the bodies themselves. The D500 is a slightly larger body, whereas the D7500 isn't as large. Now on the D500, you do have a joystick for moving through those 153 focusing points, whereas on the 7500, you do not have that. Now, is that a deal breaker at the end of the day? Not really, but it is a nice feature to have. Now, there's not a lot of other differences other than the D7500 has a proximity sensor for turning off the back of the LCD, because that's what you find more on the amateur cameras, the lower end, whereas the D500 is considered to be a pro-level camera. It also does not have a built-in flash. So the D500, being that it's a pro camera, no flash. Whereas the D7500 has a built-in flash, but of course you could put on an external SB light or a speed light because they both have hot shoes right here. Now, which one weighs more? Well, the Nikon D500 weighs in at 1.89 pounds, with the D7500 weighing in at 1.41 pounds. So I don't know who to give the check mark to here because, well, let's say, which one's heavier? D500, check mark. Which one's lighter? D7500, check mark. That's for you guys to decide which you want, a lighter camera or a slightly beefier camera. Now it's time to talk about the 2 most important tests to think about when you're going and deciding on what camera is right for you. That would be the sniff test and the wind tunnel test. Now you may notice this camera says D7500 on a piece of tape because that camera's not out yet at the time of making this video, so we have a D7000 doing stand-in. So keep that in mind. Let's sniff them. Oh. You know, they're very similar in smell because they're very similar in cameras. You know what smell I'm getting? Adhesive glue. You know, the type of adhesive glue you find on construction sites? That's what it smells like right now. But let's look at the wind tunnel test. I need to step down to get to the wind tunnel test and walk over here real quick. Yep, that was a quick wind tunnel test. I actually have a winner. I know why there's a winner here. The D500 is the winner because it doesn't have a flash built in. Because with this one, there's that little line where the flash pops up where wind gets stuck in, so the check mark goes to the D500. Now let's talk about pricing. The D500 is $1,796.95. Currently, it was marked at just under $2,000 when it first came out. The D7500 is marked at $1,246.95. So right now you have a $550 difference, and you need to decide if you're just getting into the game, do you have any glass? If you're just getting into the game, I may look more in this direction right here because you may need to save some of that money to buy extra glass. Now, if you want to stay on the DX side and go with a D500 right off the bat and spend more money on pro level glass, then that $550 may not make a big difference if you've got that extra money to spend and you want a little bit more of a beefier body, you want the 2 memory cards, you want 10 frames a second, you want more focusing points. So that's what you need to look at. If you're a professional and you want a second body, or you want to use this as your full-on professional body, body, the D500 is a tremendous camera. Keep in mind, both of these cameras have the same sensors, the same Xpeed 5 processors. You just have subtle differences with how many frames you can shoot and the focusing systems. If focus is of the utmost importance when it comes to speed because you're shooting action or you're shooting nature, I would go with the D500 even though it's a little more expensive. But if you're just getting started in the game and you don't have any glass and you're more of an amateur, you're not looking to be a professional or make too much money, then I think you can't go wrong with the D7500, even though it lacks that extra card slot, shoots 2 frames slower. You can't go wrong with that. But people always say, if I have a D7200, should I upgrade to the D7500? And I say no. That is a sideways step. That's a lateral step. You usually want to take steps up. So if you have a D7200 and you're looking for something slightly better, even though the D500 has less megapixels, I think this sensor is much better ISO capability. So I wouldn't upgrade from a 7200 to a 7500. I would consider a D500 or stepping up to full frame. So that's it in this comparison video. Which one would you go with and why? Leave that in the comments down below. And being that we're talking about gear, I want to know how you organize and protect your gear. If you don't already know, I've created an app called My Gear Vault, which you can download for free right now in the Apple App Store, and it will be available for Android after June 2017. It's the best way to input, organize, and protect your gear. So go check it out right now at mygearvault.com. It is a free app. Download it, enjoy it, use it, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.